Matt. How you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me on the show, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's a high speed train of podcast recording. It's
Awesome.
um it's been a blessing. Like I've hit my third years. Third year of recording, and
Congrats,
it's
man.
it's
It's great.
I'm doing well. Not necessarily in audience. I think I'm in a niche, which is pretty much what people are saying we should do. Like when you start a podcast, you want to be as niche as possible. Um, but then again, like it probably isn't the most trendy subject matter, like to talk about people,
Sure.
like overcoming shitty things in their lives.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
We're used to more of the glossy and the hashtag aspect of life that like I kind of don't believe in. But anyhow, the first question I have for you, Matt, is where are you located? And still asking the question of how has been the pandemic for you?
Good questions. Good questions. So I'm a fellow Canadian. I believe you're out in the Montreal area, are you not?
Yep, in the suburbs. Yep.
Cool. Cool. So I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So I've been here about 20 years. And honestly, so in Alberta out here, we just lifted all our mandates. So I'm not sure how it is out your way there, but so we've been.
Getting there.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it still feels a little bit weird. I haven't actually gone into, a grocery store or anything without my mask on quite yet. I haven't had that chance. It's going to feel a little bit awkward, for obvious reasons. But for me personally, and just like coming, like you say, coming out of this, man, 2 years, a little over 2 years now. Honestly, I worked at a grocery store. I just quit. I just quit my job actually there. We can get into, but I've been working at a grocery store for 23 years. So I was an assistant store manager actually, and we opened a brand new store right on the beginning of the third wave. So it would have been September of 2020. And that was quite the experience, I'll tell you that much. And it was so professionally, it was very challenging, working in a grocery store and, in a sense, being frontline worker in that sense. But personally, when I was outside of work, things were great, and I'll tell you why. I work very well when I have some like boundaries or parameters, right? Where I have some framework, and I'm like, okay, this is all you have. Figure it out. I'm like, I'm good at that. I can figure things out. So right away, I was like, okay. So I was going to the gym a lot. So I'm like, okay, the gyms are closed. What am I going to do? Well, I'll make a home gym. I'll make do with
Yep.
what I can do, right? I'll see my neighborhood. I'm going to go jogging outside now. Make the best of it, right? So honestly, and I don't want to be like braggadocious or anything, but I honestly thrived on a lot of personal level things during the pandemic. Just I think just more so because it's the kind of guy I am. So it was kind of a mix of both, man. It was like, the professional was very challenging and very put me to the kind of the brink of my limits with frustration and faith in people at times.
Yeah.
And on the personal side, I'm I don't mind saying I'm fairly proud of everything I was able to accomplish during those 2 years. So very good question though.
I thank you. As the pandemic exacerbated some of the stuff that you had inside, like, and I mean by that, I told that story a few times on this podcast, but one of the first dinner we had was for a birthday of a friend, and we went two couples downtown, and so as I said, I live in the suburbs, and so like it's kind of a half-hour drive, and like it has been more than a year that I hadn't drive to downtown, which is it's odd because I'm going for lunch tomorrow downtown Montreal, but um, all that to say that it was in the evening, no traffic, but I could see kind of the lights of downtown, and at some point we had a blast all dinner long, and when we walked back to our cars, um, I had, and I'm not going to say, like, again, it really is hard to explain, but kind of a tingle in the back of my neck where I was just like
Mm,
happy to be back, to be
mm,
coming back home in my
sure.
lockdown,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in my confinement. And
Yeah.
I fucking hated it, like, and I told my wife,
Interesting.
I'm like, it's not, it's kind of even like the shadow of a tingle, like it's not something. I work in sales, for God's sake, like, so I'm not afraid of people. I'm not, like, interactions is not something that, but it definitely has amplified
Mhm.
um, stuff that probably is even hidden or stashed or kind of buried inside me. And so
Completely.
and the reason why I do ask, like 2 years, and as you do in Edmonton, like I'm our our restrictions are slowly but surely dropping as well, but at the same time, um, there is a postmortem of that situation where like all of these um, shitty feelings or whatever anxieties or fears that have been amplified by the pandemic are not going to be dropped as the fucking restrictions will. Like so for me
100%.
it is. That's why I asked the question, like, have you felt that some stuff you had inside, because you said you worked on like kind of on you, but have you felt that some of these fears or like thoughts were amplified by being alone, restricted, confined, like all by yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great point. And I like what you're saying. It's like, because for me, I broke it into two stages. Like year one, I don't think I had as many issues because like you kind of kept expecting it to be over. And then last summer, when everything started to kind of open up again, I had this false sense of hope, I guess, that we're okay. Life is going
Yeah.
to go back to normal again here, right? And then you quickly realize by September it's here we go again, sort of thing, right? So last summer, I remember being asked the similar subject matter as to what we're talking about right now, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm excited. I'm ready. But honestly, this time it's 2 years in, and like I play in a band as well. And it's been 2 years since we performed live. Like we've done, our Facebook Live, we've done the streaming and so forth. But to actually get into a pub and a bar, I have a lot more like reservations around it coming out of year two than I did year one, where
Yeah.
year one I was like, a year is nothing, right? But after 2 years, like to your point, you have this accumulation effect of these feelings
Hmm.
that, yes, they are coming out, and that's great. But I really think that second year specifically took a toll on everybody, right? Because you start seeing, like, my brother's a healthcare worker, like he works at Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver, and he's going through all this like this just nonsense, right? Like people are throwing stuff at him, and whereas 2 years ago, he's like the hero, right? And even me, like a grocery
Exactly.
store, people are coming up to me, "Thank you for what you do." I was like, "Wow, I've never had such a I'm just a grocery store guy."
Acknowledgement. Yeah.
Acknowledgement, right? And it felt pretty good, right? I get used to it pretty quickly, right? And then 3 months later, it's like you're the you know everybody's complaining to you again, and it's like right back to you kind of just get used to it, and then it's like back to normal. But almost to the other side of things where people are starting to yell at you and like, well, what are you doing? I'm entitled to this. And everybody gets impatient with it, and then it manifests itself in different uncomfortable ways. But yeah, to answer your question, like, I think yeah, it's a strange thing because I've gotten to know. I do a podcast as well, so a lot of Zoom calls, right? And I'm super comfortable with the Zoom calls. And now it's like when I actually have that human energy, like if I were to be sitting in the room with you, it'd be a little bit different, just because there's no
Absolutely.
right. There's that energy, like we're exchanging energy, as opposed to right now we're looking at each other on the monitor, and there is something to be said for that. And after 2 years of having that sort of removal from that human contact of being that close to somebody and missing that energy exchange of just being in a room with somebody under that
Hmm.
kind of context. Yeah, for sure. It's maybe a little, I wouldn't say like more anxious. It's not that, but there's a level of uncertainty that wasn't there last year or even 6 months ago. That here it is, it's
Absolutely.
springtime. It's like, you can feel the energy, the seasonal change, the energy that comes along with spring. And I feel a little bit of hesitancy now with just me getting out there. And so I am, yeah, to answer your question, for sure. There's a lot of, yeah, just uncertainty. It's not fear because, like, to your point, like you're in sales, so I'm sure, like you say, you're around people, you're comfortable with your people skills,
Yep.
but there's still just the, you kind of, what have you lost along the way a little bit? You're a little bit rusty with certain, ways of interacting with people. Is more so, and yeah, dude, like I've
Feeling a room, like the
totally,
sales example,
totally,
like it is one of the, like it's one thing that I tried to explain to my ex colleagues when it all shut down. Like I said, guys, I, I'm, I think I'm pretty good at feeling a room. I can't feel a Zoom room. You
right,
know,
Yeah, big
You
difference.
know, like,
Big
so
difference.
I can definitely read a room where, um, some execs have less reach within an organization than some admins, for example. You know, like, so I work
Mm,
in technology, so I meet with, like, the IT department, administrator, but then you meet with the VP of IT, and but when you do feel a room and get that feeling when people, the way people sit, the way they shake your hand,
totally.
like, all of that stuff, like, I had a good sixth sense of that, like, saying, VP is not driving the show here, like,
Right,
that admin does. Um, I can't do that on a Zoom where all I see is, his face in,
right.
like, in portrait mode, like, it's,
Yeah,
and even worse so when people shut down their cameras, like, so it was, that adaptation was pretty freaking hard.
right.
On top of it, like, that first year, I literally, my son was, we're 3 years in, 2 years in now, and my son was 4, and so no more daycare. So like, stuck at home. Both my wife and I are kind of designated as essential workers, but non-vital. Like, I don't work in health, but people need to buy IT, especially for companies.
For sure.
Um, so I decide that, like, I'm gonna take more time because my wife works for an SMB at the time. I do work for, like, a larger corporation, which can allow or afford to lose me more on my time than, my wife. Um, I end up running almost 900K that summer, pushing a stroller, because
Yeah,
that was the only way I could, and fueling and feeding optimism, like, just like, okay, like, almost done, we should be good, as
right.
you say, like,
Yeah,
almost like everything's going to be all right, like,
yeah,
I'm fucking freaking out, but
yeah.
everything's going to be good,
Right.
running and running and running. And at some point, like you said, like, the second year, they kind of loose up and you're like, oh, okay, so we should be okay. And there's already some sign of discomfort, like you're like, ooh, that's weird, like, this awkwardness is already, you kind of already feel it.
Yeah,
And then you
definitely.
say, oh, sorry, like, we're taking it all out
Yeah.
again. And that last holiday season was really, really tough, like, I was like,
Mhm.
man. And not that I completely understand some of the extremists and, like, the people that went, like over the top with that.
Right.
But there was some sense of comprehension of, I the fed up part, I get it.
100%. I totally get you on that. Absolutely. And everybody was, but yeah, to your point though, exactly. Not to condone any extreme behavior because like you and I are
No, no, no,
frustrated,
no, no.
but we're not driving to yeah, I'm not going to get into that, but you know what I
There's
mean.
no,
But
like,
that,
the
like,
people won't see it, but there's no tinfoil hats on any one of us,
yeah, that's right. No tin foil here. Exactly. Yeah.
But it is, like, it is the, like, the kind of situation where, um getting back, like, I was saying that, like, I'm going on a lunch and it's the first business lunch in almost 2 years that I'm
Wow.
going to
Yeah.
tomorrow, like,
Crazy.
and I'm not meeting with customers, I'm meeting with partners, which, like, is a bit different because of, like, kind of the power dynamics and all.
Yeah.
But I have to admit that it's just like, ooh, okay, like,
Yep.
it's,
Sure.
wow, like,
Yeah.
that's really, really weird, like,
Yeah.
there is something that's really weird.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, and there is really a, I, uh, uh, I I repeat myself on that, but, like, I any listeners, like, I don't want them to forget that by the time this shit will be over, um, I hope that the authorities and, like, kind of the government, the different level governments actually and authorities will keep in mind that there's going to be as much, if not more, efforts in making sure that, those kind of micro traumas that, went all over the population are being taken care of and listened to, like, and
Mm. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
about that a lot, like,
Yeah.
because, I consider myself stable, 17 years sober, like, all kinds of stuff that,
Nice,
I
man.
kind of,
Congrats.
I had thank you, but, like, I had to work on myself, like,
Right.
kind of
Right.
not prepare, but, like, obviously you have to build some strong foundation to keep yourself sober and keep yourself sane and,
For sure.
and and life throws shit at you anyways, like, but all that to say
Yeah.
that, um all that to say that, like, despite all of this, like, at some point during that 2-year period, I felt, weak at some point,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
or weaknesses,
Weaknesses. Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
and and so can you imagine what it was or what it has been for someone that already felt on their knees, like,
Yeah.
when we got into that, like, it must have been crazy, like, so that really is what I who and what I do think about. When, like, I think about, like, so every time they announce that, like, okay, so you can go out more and, like, less of the mask and less of the passport and less of this and that. I'm like, yeah, but there are people that are still clearly freaking out still
Yeah.
and
There is.
clearly scared
Yeah.
shitless of going out of their houses
Yeah.
still,
Yeah, there is. It's funny. Yeah. I mean, good points all around. And, even here, I want to say yesterday or the day before, there was a protest and nobody was really quite sure why. Everybody was kind of joking as everybody's going. I was like, we're not sure what we want, but we want it now. And it's just like this frustration that's boiled over. So people just want to get out and get into a group
Yeah.
and share the frustration more than anything. Cause like everything's opened up. So I don't know what you guys are protesting. It was very strange. And, we have some fun with it a little bit. But at the same token, it's just like, wow. But that's what it is. I like how you said it, Alex, when you're saying there's these like micro traumas that are going to show up in different ways and with different people, and different people are going to have, everybody's going to have different, variations of what we're talking about, right? As far as like going back out to life as normal, right? Whatever that may be now. There's going to be people on different timelines as far as their comfortabilities. There's going to be still people that are going to want to pick fights, right? Because that's just the natural, order of
Yeah.
some people, right? They want to be antagonistic. So now they don't have the anti-vax or the anti-masking thing. So they're going to figure out some other way to kind of, you know what I mean? Just be antagonistic. So yeah, it'll be
And
interesting. It'll be interesting for sure. But
it's it, like, I saw someone comment that because, like, there was like an announcement and people were like, at fucking last, like, we can, keep the mask off and da 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 da. And like, there was a lady commenting like, what if I still want to put it, like, what if, like, am I
totally.
going to be judged? And and I was like, wow, like, so you're not in a rush at all, like, you're
Right.
definitely, like, so that definitely has kind of imprinted something in people's mind. um so yeah, like, it's gonna be interesting, like, a lot of postdoctorate and master's degrees, college thesis that's gonna be interesting to read in a few
Yes.
years from now,
Very good
like,
point. Yeah.
very,
Very,
very.
yeah. It's and you know what? The other funny thing too on the other side of that, I've never thought of it like that. That's really cool though. But I've always thought like the output of art that's going to be coming out of with the COVID, projects that people took up instruments and they're just kind of learning it now. And it could be 3 to 5 years from now after they get to the stage where they can, perform at a level where they can release something. I think there's a lot of people that started taking up some, like I know for sure camping and getting outdoors because that's sort of the
Yeah.
go around with COVID, which that's great, right? Get out, get some fresh air, right? But yeah, definitely with the getting into playing instruments or just learning art and something. I think there's going to be
Absolutely.
you know what I mean, a whole group of people that it's going to be releasing art coming out of this as well. So man, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like this is something that's
So
going
so
to
much stuff.
right
You
repercussions for
make
years.
me realize that, like, a good friend of mine told me during Christmas time that, and it was such an interesting observation. He said, my parents grew older faster in the past few years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I could see
And if
that.
you look at it, like, I see exactly what he meant. And
Yeah,
I said, wow, you're right. My dad is 73. And not that he just grew older faster.
yeah.
And I think we all did.
Yeah, you're right, man. Yeah, it's and when you're talking about the mask and the one lady that you see in the article, and she was like not in a big rush. That's my mom, right? So my mom has Crohn's and a couple other things. She's just,
Hmm.
and she lives by herself. She doesn't want to put herself in a spot that she's going to be burdensome or to any of her neighbors or whatnot, right?
Yep.
Or anybody. So she has made the decision she's going to keep wearing a mask. She lives in a smaller town in BC. But still, you start hearing these stories, to your point, of these people that are going around tapping people on the shoulder that are wearing masks and going, hey, you don't have to wear those anymore. And, kind of being almost antagonistic or whatever
Yeah,
agenda they have. And my mom's
totally.
like, I'm going to be uncomfortable with that. Somebody tapping me on the shoulder. It's like, it's my choice to do it. So what's the difference, right? But there's still tensions are high still. It's going to take a while for things to simmer back down, right? And some people are going to want to stay up here because that's their nature, right? So yeah, man,
It's gonna be
such
hashtag keep the mask matter.
yeah. Totally. I see it now. I think, yeah, you've called it. Man, if that comes up, I'm emailing you right away. I'm be like, man, you called that one.
Just yeah, my own imagination, but I called it
Yeah.
first, man. It's
Yeah,
gonna
that's
be
right. That's
hashtag keep the mask matter. Like just like
right.
anyways, like what
Yeah.
and we're in that swing, and like we're in that era. Like so it's gonna be my right, my choice. Like
Oh, completely, man.
I don't want to be an asshole in this, but
Yeah.
like it is going to be kind of like kind of on that swing of things. Like
Yep.
where
Yep.
and I'm all for it. It's just that like sometimes the pendulum pushes a bit too hard on one swing or the other.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, but I called it first.
Just saying. Just saying. Him. Yeah. Yeah. Have a timestamp on this podcast. Yeah.
That's me.
March
That's me.
14th, eh? Yeah. That's
All
good.
right.
Yeah.
Back to regular programming.
Yeah.
I usually ask my guests to rewind their life story tape to um, as young as they can remember some event that has kind of forged who they became, or like kind of the path that they want to tell my audience. Sometimes it's like for me like it obviously is on my mom's side, um, a lot of drinking, like so like
Mm.
really really young I saw that, like I saw kind of the um actually the folklore that ran around, like the my mom's family drinks, um and it obviously has made a mark on me. What about you, Matt? Like where like where do we rewind that tape, and tell me a bit about kind of the story, or like give me an idea of the photo and the landscape of this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. Good setup. So I grew up in Prince George, British Columbia. So it's like the northern capital. So about 70,000 people, very isolated. It's kind of a logger town, blue collar, lots of nature around. So I remember that was big for me growing up. I could literally hop my fence, be in the green belt. So I spent a lot of time in nature. But yeah, being like Prince George was pretty, like I always when I think like blue collar, I think like, the culture is like work hard, come home, have your beers, right? So like it was modeled for me right away. My dad, big time, big drinker, and his whole side of the family. So my dad's dad, my great grandfather and great grandmother were both very into, and it shows up on my mom's side too. Like my mom's brother, my uncle Paul, was very very into drugs and alcohol, but especially like a daily drinker, right? So my dad and my uncle Paul would get together, and when I was like 4 years old, and I just remembered the energy changing, right? I remember like it get louder, and they kind of, it seemed fun, right? Because I'm like, okay,
Exactly.
they're
Yeah.
kind of hitting each other and they're acting like kids almost. So I'd go in and be like, hey, like what's going on? And that's when I get my first sip of beer, right? I'm 4 or 5 years old, and the kid does the bitter beer face, like and they laugh and all this. So I'm associating fun and kind of this carefree attitude with it, right? So that was pretty early on. That was my earliest memory. Actually, it was about 4 or 5 years old, and having a sip of kokanee or whatever it may have been. And fast forward a couple of years, another memory that really sticks with me that's worth mentioning, Alex, is I remember playing house when I was in my basement. And like a kid, you set up the house and pretend like you got a kitchen and all this. And I'm like, I had these little bottles, and I was like 7. I'm like, okay, this is like my liquor cabinet, and I'm setting that up. And I'm looking back on, I'm like, why would I have thought to do this at 7 years old, right? But very much modeled for me, at this point. And I believe that there's a degree of like genetic passed down, like you're predisposed. You hear this, right? So there's a
What's
blend
the
of
fraternity like? Brothers and sisters in there?
yeah. So I have
What's
one older brother,
okay?
no, and that's it. So it's just me and my brother Josh. Okay.
And does E catches that vibe as well, or
Little different, you know. So my brother's a lot more cerebral than me. He was a little more keep to himself, a little more like into his studies, right? So he'd be in his room a
yep,
lot more often, and kind of studying. He liked nature too, so he'd be more apt to be in his room studying a book about birds or something like that, right?
yeah,
A little
yeah, yeah,
less
yeah.
on the social side. I was more social, so so I'd get into that. But yeah, my brother did come into it a little bit later because we get into our teenage years. I was always into sports. And I remember very distinctly, my parents got divorced when I was 14. My brother was 16. And at that point, I had a tough time with it. High school for me there was no middle school. So it was grade 8 to 12. So I went into to high school as I didn't hit my growth spurt until about grade 10. So I was very small and I was very shy to begin with as a kid. And with everything happening at home, I remember showing up to high school just being kind of stunned because I was like, man, my home life is falling apart. There's so much change at high school here. I'm just, I'm getting interested in women, but like I don't know how to talk to them because I'm shy. And I was easy target for bullying, right? Because I'm not saying anything to anybody. And I kind of got this stunned look on my face. So I got bullied, right, for a couple of years. And, I was trying to do whatever I could to kind of fit in, doing sports and all that. But it wasn't really my thing, mainly because I like being harmonious with people. When the competition I would just get too emotional. I would just be too emotional when when the game would actually start. I was good in practice, not so good when the game started because I couldn't hold my emotions in check. So that was why music really resonated with me because then I could sort of express myself in a more abstract and safe way, through
Hmm.
music and really express myself. And of course, as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know, along with music becomes the rock and roll lifestyle identity, right? So right off the bat, I'm like, I found something that speaks to me with my guitar, music, and writing songs and all that. Couple that with alcohol. So I started experimenting really seriously with it about age 16 and getting into marijuana as well. And then all of a sudden, the whole world opened up to me, or so I thought, right? So, you know how alcohol is when it initially meets you. It's like it's your best friend.
Best
Alcohol puts
buddy.
his arm
Yes,
around you and goes, that girl you're always afraid to talk to, you won't be afraid after you have a couple of drinks, you'll be fine. And, and it's
you
just
look
this
at it
way.
like an ass, but I won't tell you.
Right, exactly. Which at the time you don't think that, right? So, that's what it was, man. It was I was off to the races with that. By the time I was about 18, I was playing, in pubs and bars and bands. And it's again one of these curious things looking back on it in hindsight. Playing in a band is one of the only jobs that they pay you with like beer. They're like, "Hey, before you go up
Yep,
there, drink up." It's one of the only
there's
jobs
a
you can
few
drink on the
coupons.
Yeah, right? Yeah, so that's what it was. It was like I'm getting like like, encouraged to drink on the job. So of course I do, right? And then I started mixing in some psychedelics. I was getting into mushrooms and things of that nature. Anything that kind of like I like that, just kind of getting a more open perspective on life. And I was trying to find myself, right? Because I was always afraid of being alone by myself because I didn't really know what to do with my emotions. So the drinking helped me with that, or I say that with a kind of questioning, still kind of questioning where I was going
But
with it.
did you already realize that it was hard being alone with your thoughts or alone with your emotions?
So yeah,
Or it's
interesting.
looking back that, or it's looking back that you realize that, like even being alone was something painful.
So yeah, good question. Good question. I'll clarify that. I had issues with being by myself with my thoughts during the period where I was getting bullied specifically because I was just trying to
Mm,
figure out why. Well, like why am I a target? And it was more so of a way of figuring out how to get so I wasn't
yeah.
getting bullied, right? So when I figured that out, right? So basically, what I did is I started getting ahead of it. So if somebody was going to make fun of me, I would make sure to laugh first. And then it's like it's to the point where they aren't getting the reaction out of you, or they go, "Oh, this guy's
You're avoiding that shit. Yeah, yeah, you kinda
avoiding it,"
avoid.
right?
Yeah.
It's avoiding, right? So big time. So that's what I went with. So there was more so with that, and of course, me processing what was going on with my parents. So those are the two main things. Aside from that, I did enjoy being by myself for the most part. Like I wrote in a journal a lot. I would write music a lot. But when it came down to the figuring out why I was getting bullied and the whole divorce thing, yes, I definitely had some issues with that, with being by myself. There was just my mind would go places I didn't like it to go. And, that was sort of based on, sort of the environment too. So my brother as well handled it quite differently. So he was on like antidepressant medication. So
Wow.
he was very, very much kept to himself. I remember a memory too that very much resonates with me even now that I was home. It was maybe 5 o'clock. It's usually where we'd have family dinner. My dad has moved out by this point. I remember looking up the stairs, and my room, my brother's room, and my mom's room was up there. And they both had their doors closed, and it was just like quiet as a ghost. I think they were both just sleeping. And it was like kind of not in the middle of the day, but like around dinner time. And I was just like, man, this feels lonely. Like this feels unnatural, right? Like they're both just,
Even
it's
sad. Yeah,
sad. It
something
was
sad
sad.
about
It
it.
was sad. Yeah, it was. Right. So that was a bit tricky for me, right? And I was always a happy kid. I was always glass half full. I was always trying to make people laugh. Being the youngest in the
Yeah.
family, that was my role I identified with. And even with my parents going through the divorce, I felt like I was this mediator between them somehow. And maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I mean, I look back on it. I tried my best. I would, because when there's lawyers involved, my dad would start kind of going, your mom was saying this about me. And I'd be like, no, no, mom, she doesn't mean that way. Like I've heard her talk about you, and really try and temper everything. Right. And kind of go in between and do my best with that. So, for better or for worse, that's definitely something I've brought forward into adulthood, is like this idea that I have to help people and mediate things and advocate on behalf of people and not worry about myself. So that was something I learned later on, for sure. But yeah, I mean, fast forward to I'll give you the highlight reel of the things that made me realize that it's a problem. So I got heavy drinking in my 20s. By that point, I bought a house, and just everything was starting to get to kind of level up. I had been in a relationship for 5 years, been in a band that was doing fairly well, had a full-time job, bought a house. So I thought everything was doing well. So in the meantime, I was, playing hard, partying hard. So I was drinking daily by that point. And by the time I was 27, I actually hospitalized myself for acute pancreatitis from just a really rough accumulation of drinking, but specifically a rough party weekend. I ended up in the hospital for 3 days. And yeah, that was like, I just remember going, yeah, like the whole time I'm like, okay, as soon as I get out of here, I'm done. Like I'm done drinking. This is my second chance. I thought I was a goner, right? Like some of the worst pain I've been in for, a substantial amount of time, 6, 8 hours before they could kind of figure out what was wrong with me. And I remember just living, looking up at the hospital roof and just, doing like the whole, okay, this is it. Like if I get out of here, I'll never drink again. And you know how it goes, man. It's like within 24 hours, what I did is I had that like justifying mind. It's like, well, that was rye, that was whiskey that did that to me. But if I do clear one like vodka, that's clear liquid, or beer. No, nothing ever happens to people on beer. I can drink beer,
Exactly.
right? Within
Mm.
24 hours, I had a beer in my hand. And like, not my finest moment, right? That could have been my rock bottom moment, and it wasn't. And I continued to drink beer, to the point I was like up to like 20 a night at times, right? And just for a guy my size, everybody's like, oh, I can't believe that was like a source of pride for me, like, oh yeah, I impressed that guy. I can drink freaking 18 beer and, be falling over by the end of the night. Yeah, great. So I got to that stage and had some, a relationship just go sideways on me. And it was very painful for me. And that was my rock bottom moment. I remember actually before that, I fell down a set of stairs. I still got the scar here from it. It was I decided to smoke a cigarette that night, and I hadn't smoked for a while. And you get that big head rush. I'm like, oh, I gotta go downstairs for a bit. See you guys. Boom! Just right down the stairs, header. Hit my head on the concrete floor. Blood everywhere. I had to get taken to the hospital again. And then about a month after that, I was still all kind of banged up, post concussion syndrome and such. And then got dumped. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. This is it. So I took I was lucky enough to get 5 weeks off work just to clean up. The first 2 weeks of the 5 weeks, I kept drinking, right? And then finally, it's a story that's near and dear to my heart because my buddy Brent, who had gone through AA and Narcotics Anonymous as well, I reached out to him. And I said, you know what, dude, like, I don't think I'll go to one of these myself. I'm just a bit nervous to go to one of these. He's like, I'll pick you up. Let's go. There's one like just down the way from your house. So we go there and we get to the parking lot. And I just remember just the vibe of even getting in the parking lot. I was proud of myself for getting there. And I was like, I remember telling him, like, you know what,
Yes.
man, I think I'm good. Like, I'm watching people come and go. And I was like, this is close enough. Right. And I remember Brent, it was a turning point for my life, essentially. He looks at me and he has this big smile. He's one of the most likable guys. He goes, it's all good, man. It's safe in there. We'll have fun. And he gives me this big smile. And I'm just kind of like, okay, let's do this. And we go in there, and Brent is just like I say, such a likable guy, and everybody's like high-fiving him and hugging him and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is not what I was expecting, right? And we sit down, and I remember the guy. I don't even remember what the guy says. Like, it's like the opening, whatever they do at the AA meetings or whatever this was, just to kind of get things started. He's reading the opening couple lines out of the book, and I literally remember like a physical weight leaving. Like, I keep my stress in my neck and my shoulders, and I felt a physical something leave that area of my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost started tearing up, and I was just like, wow. And there was like a shift that I've never had since, and I hadn't had before that. That was just, I was like, okay, so this got through to
That's
me.
it.
That's it. And after that, back, like, it was about 3.5 years of alcohol free at that point. I would love to say that I'm still I was still up to that point, but my ego got in the way at that point, and it was a matter of I think I can do moderation now, right? It's like the addict mind. The three worst words you can say is "I got this," and I didn't have
And
it. Yeah,
and
right. Yeah, and the and is
can you
yeah, right.
can you be moderate, Matt?
Yeah, no, 0% success rate. So, I tried, and fast forward, this would have been 2019, and we're coming up on my 3-year again. So my mulligan here. So it'll be
Congrats.
April. Thanks, man. April 9th of this year will be 3 years. And what it did for me this time, Alex, is my dad actually passed away December, a couple days before Christmas, very
Sorry to
suddenly.
hear that.
Thank you. It was right before Christmas 2018. And he was 66. He had just retired, and 35 years as a fireman in Prince George. And yeah, he'd always lived that hard lifestyle, man. He was still just giving, or he was drinking like he was friggin' a teenager still at times, right? And I caught up with him, and yeah, he passed away. And at the time I was getting those taps on the shoulder again. I knew it, and I knew it, and I was like, okay, I got to change something here. And I had a pretty rough party weekend in April of 2019, involving everything, all the hits, right? And I just remember that weekend. Coming out of that weekend, I had to drive back to Prince George from Edmonton. It's about 8 hours. And I usually saved a couple beers for the next morning, just to kind of, the hair of the dog, right? And I just had it. I had two, and I drank one right before I left for this big drive. Yeah, as heroic as that sounds. And the second one, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I just dumped it. I started driving, and I got to Jasper. So Jasper is a part of the Canadian Rocky Mountains, basically right in between Prince George and Edmonton. And it was just a beautiful blue sky day, and one of the most beautiful spots on earth that I've ever seen. And I just felt empty. And I was like, so I picked up my phone, and I just started kind of recording myself, how I felt, just to get it out, just get that energy moving, right? And it was bad, man. It was like, I was starting to get into like suicidal ideation, and just like hopeless. Like, I could never
Do
listen
you
to
still
it.
have that recording, Matt?
No, I deleted it. I deleted it.
Oh my
Yeah, I
god.
deleted it.
No, not for me, but for you.
Yeah.
Like they
I'll look
always
back on
say
it, right? Yeah.
exactly.
I
They
was
always say,
right?
like never forget where you come from.
It's
Like and
true.
that
It's yeah. I don't know if I'd be so cringe. Like, I would just be, yeah, but you're
oh
right
my
though.
god, that,
It would,
no doubt.
right? It would be profound to listen to it. So that's what I did. That was my, they always talk about in recovery, finding a reason outside of yourself. So that was what
Yep.
I did. I was heading to the celebration of life for Dad. And I said, you know what? I'm doing this for Dad. I'm doing this for, like, not only Dad, the whole lineage of the family, this alcohol,
Breaking that cycle.
right, breaking the cycle, man. And that's what it was. And I hope that doesn't come across as egotistical or whatnot, because it's not. It's really not. It's for, it's for helping, the family reconcile this. So I truly
Yeah.
believe, if I continue on with this, like it, my ancestors are going, thank you, Matt, for doing that. Something that I couldn't do. And again, no ego involved. That's just something that I feel in my heart.
Oh
So,
no, and you know, I'm listening to some podcasts and some documentary about some MLM that they were selling leggings or whatever. I don't remember the name. Blue something. Anyways,
oh,
but
Lululemon,
all that to say that well, it's like Lululemon, but it
but
it
different.
it was like a multi-level marketing scheme stuff,
Oh,
like that and they defraud, single moms and moms at home, and
oh,
it's a
wow.
crazy fucking story.
Oh,
But
man.
it's not. The point is that they had a great, great, great question, which is find your why. You know,
Yes.
find your why. Like why are you keeping, like and I always say that, like there are a million reasons why I keep sober, but they are the same that then transform into excuses that people relapse on.
Ooh, interesting. I like that.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
so I can say, like so my mom died, like so I can say I I stopped drinking to honor, like the passing of my mother,
Right.
but I could be drinking as an excuse because my mom died. Like
I
and
gotcha. That's yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. So you can go, which side are you gonna go on, right? Yeah.
exactly the same points I bring. Like my son, my wife, and yeah, but like uh, I do that because I want to be a great dad, but then at the same time, like it takes a lot of responsibility and takes a lot of like you need to take a lot on your shoulders. So that could be an excuse for me to drink, and so on and so forth. Like I have
Yeah,
a great
right.
job, but it's a lot of pressure. So well,
Totally.
I want to
That's
keep my
smart, man.
job, but then again, I could
Yeah.
be drinking because
Yeah,
it's too
yeah.
much pressure, and I deserve it. Like and it
Yes.
kind of
The entitlement part,
you
big time.
exactly. You probably
Yeah.
know a bit about this. I don't
Heck
know,
yeah.
but like
Yeah. I've never heard somebody like articulate it like that. That there's like you could go either way with it. It's either an excuse
always
or it's a reason why not to. Yeah.
a motivation. Yeah,
Super
it's
a
just a
motivation. I
motivation.
like that better, man. Yeah,
And
that's
so
super cool.
like same for like you end up like at that crossroad, and like you see that beautiful landscape, and so on and so forth. So could be a motivation to say, well, there's a greater and superior like entity that created this, and like I can appreciate this, and
Yes.
I'm like I want to be sober because of like kind of the whatever it is, God as you define it or whatever, like, and I don't want to fall into, like some dogma or whatever. It just,
Yeah,
this
sure.
is fucking strong, like seeing the Rockies is,
Yeah.
you cannot fucking build this, right? It is
100%. Yeah.
stronger than you, whatever you look at it, like, I don't
Yeah.
know what it is, science, whatever, take it to
Yeah.
the angle you want, like
Yeah.
God, the science, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, but it is grander than, like our little person.
Yes.
um, so then again, like that's a great point to say, you know what, like I want to be able to appreciate that,
Yes.
or like an excuse that like, well, look at me, I can't appreciate that shit, like,
Yeah.
and just be
Yeah.
whining about,
Yeah.
and I find this super interesting because like as you say, you repeat it multiple times. This is not ego. This is fuck no. It's no ego. Like
Right.
and it is not ego. Like it is not ego um to decide that we're going to be, for a while at least, the number one priority is our well-being and our
Right.
better being, you
Yes.
know
I like that.
and it is because of that like when we have the initial talk about like the pandemic and how we feel, it is because we built those block of foundation that we can look back at us and say, oh shit, I feel anxious right now, and I feel
Yeah.
scared, and I feel this is a feeling of fear, like of going out, and this is a feeling of panic, or whatever it is, because we've learned to not only look back but almost like deconstruct, like who we are, and say, okay, if I do lack sleep, or if I don't eat well, or if I don't take care of my body, um, I am I am more weak, you know,
Yeah.
uh, in all in all other areas in my life,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
if I don't, um, and you mentioned, trying the moderate way, like I tried a year before going into therapy, and it was actually like a public sector founded center that, like, it's called, in French it's réduction des méfaits, and I know there's a translation of that, but I don't I always forget.
Right.
Um but all that to say that that's what, like, the therapist was telling me, that, like, I could be able to be, reasonable about my use. And well, I just I fed into this, like, big time. I was like, oh, okay, then, like, let me give it a small break, like a 3-month break, and
Right.
I'll then start, like, being reasonable again. And next thing you know, like, I'm like, I'm all in. And
Yeah.
and then I had a conversation with a colleague of mine today, because he's like, "Oh, I'm so freaking fed up." Like, he has a good friend that's using, and like, he can't get him to stop. And he's like, "Well, like, he's just." He was telling me that he's just transferred to prescribed drugs. Like, he's like, "Well, he
Oh,
feels legit now because like, it's been prescribed
yeah.
by a doctor."
Right.
I'm like, he's called Pascal. I'm like, Pascal, I in my that's not who, in my personality. I have eaten too much candy to the point of throwing them up.
Mm.
To this day, and like, it's looking back that I realize that, but to this day I cannot eat bananas, because young kid, I probably made like a 10 level peanut butter bread and banana
Yeah.
sandwich
Nice.
that I did throw up. I like, almost like a food poisoning shit,
Sure.
like, and
Sure.
you know, but to this day, like 40 something years later, I cannot eat a banana, like,
Wow. Yeah.
so, you know, and gummy bears and I've thrown them all up, like, and after it's an ex colleague of mine, still a friend, that has told me once. He's like, Alex, you realize that you tell me the story about, like, eating too many candies and too much candies, like, on 3 or 4 occasions. Like, so you
Yeah.
can't not eat Skittles anymore, and you
Yeah.
cannot eat gummy bears anymore, and you
Yeah.
can I mean, like, "You're right, huh?" He's like, you definitely cannot
Yeah.
use alcohol or drugs, man." Like, you
Sure. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny though, right? Yeah. But the one thing I can do is alcohol. Yeah. Yeah. All that other stuff. Yeah. Bananas, gummy bears.
No.
Yeah. Right.
As
Yeah.
as you probably went, like, a few, nights practicing your craft of guitar or music,
Yeah.
and went way over the time you had initially allowed yourself, because you want to be in shape, and you want to be,
Yeah.
like, you want to have a good night of sleep and whatever, and realize that it's 3 a.m. Ah, fuck, like, it's
Yeah.
screwing up your next day of work. And
Yeah.
and that's the kind of personality we have. Like, it,
Yeah.
it is where, like, some colleagues professionally will say we're passionate, but we're just extreme. Like,
Extreme. Obsessed. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Extreme. Definitely extreme. Yeah. You're right. You're right about that. Yeah. I'm curious to, for you, like, because I know for sure the answer for me was, beyond music, like to replace that initial energy during recovery, I was exercise. I just love what that did. What was it for you? What was it that it was like you kind of
It took a
replacing that?
while. It took a
Yeah.
while. I would say that, like, family. I have 3 kids. Like, so, like, kind of the family thing took over, and
Sure. Yeah.
my career was a bit of a mess. So for a while, I kept busy at that a lot. Like,
Gotcha.
and failing on my aspirations. Like, I had
Sure.
professional aspirations that were, like, that I was well, not probably, but obviously late on, because like, I had just, like, missed all of these occasion opportunities. Um, all that to say that a bit later, I would say maybe 8, 9 years in, I started doing, like, I had never run in my life and never been a fit kid, or not fat, but never interested in sports, solo or group.
Mm.
Like, I never was interested in sports. And then I heard someone on the radio mention something about obstacle racing,
Oh, okay.
talk about
Yeah.
the Tough Mudders, and, like, the Spartan race and all that. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
ooh, okay, interesting. And then I became just a fucking freak on these
Really
races. Yeah, big
interesting.
time. So I
Yeah.
did I did what, in Spartan they call them trifectas, which are, like they have more now, but they initially had three distances: 5, 15, and 25. So if you did the three races in one summer, they would give you like a special medal. I have
Wow.
two or three of those.
Wow.
Um, but like summer after summer, my passion completely reoriented to um pushing just those limits to the extreme, and then
Yeah.
I had my third kid 6 years ago, and like it obviously shake things up, so
Yeah.
you have to be, you have to slow down on some stuff, and so my trading cadence took a hit. But I'm clearly back, and not as last weekend, um, my wife and I talked, and I said, I'm 47. I just had 47 in February, and
Nice.
um, I said I need to do an ultra, whatever the distance is, but like it can be a 50K or 50 mile or whatever.
Mhm.
But by 50 years old, I have to have done a ultra. I don't
Wow.
know how. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that, but
Yeah.
this is an objective I'm fixing myself. Like that by 50 years old, there's going to be in my list what's deemed or labeled an ultra marathon. So I'm not interested in the Iron Man and all that stuff. I don't care about that, but
Right.
I want to run a trail, nice landscape that
Yeah.
adds up to me running what's labeled as an ultra.
Super
And
cool.
again, like I just don't know how I'm going to do that.
Sure, sure. We got
you
the
know,
vision for it anyways, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
I have that aspiration. And still, like I'm always looking at kind of the next race, or like kind of the next thing that I'm going to do, and as you did, like I've always had a home gym.
Yeah.
Just because it uses up to your true training time driving down to a gym,
Yeah.
changing, shower, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
For like it uses up too much of what you allow yourself as training time. Like so
Yeah. Yeah.
like driving to a gym, like you can end up spending quote unquote 2 or 3 hours, but you only really spend training an hour.
Yeah.
Where at home, it's instant, right? Like
Yeah.
put my shorts. I'm
Yeah.
in 5 minutes. I'm
Yeah.
treadmilling or whatever,
Yeah.
and in an hour, I will be exhausted, and I will spend, and I just go up,
Yeah.
jump in the shower. Like so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do this in the morning, and by 9:30, my son's at school. I'm fully trained. I'm showered up and ready to work. Like
Yeah.
so,
Good feeling,
and yeah,
right?
phenomenal feeling. And yeah, and you run your morning on caffeine and endorphins. Like so, it's
Totally, man. Sounds like we got the same kind of thing, other than I don't have kids. But yeah, you're right though. That's one of the things, like, because we're talking, coming out of COVID at the beginning of our conversation. It's been nice to go back to the gyms every now and then, but honestly, I'm gonna to just from what you just verbalized, I love that too. Just being able to go downstairs, like you say, you cut out the drive time, with
yeah,
potentially standing in line waiting for people. And I'm so used to it now, and I can get it done just like that. And like you say, it's you conquered your morning, you're boom, you're ready to go. And you just, like you say, endorphins, have a cup of coffee on the way to work or whatever it may be. And man, it's like your day, just the whole tone of your day is set. You got this momentum, feels
yep,
great. So it's gonna be tricky, because before I was literally going to the gym every day. But there's like the commute time and all that. And now that I've eliminated that, it's gonna be kind of tricky to go back to it in a lot of senses, right?
absolutely.
Right?
And there are so many nice programs available, both on your cell phone, on your web
Yeah.
browser. There
Yeah.
are so many great programs available out there. Like
Yeah.
that whatever it is. Like I initially started with all of the Beachbody stuff,
Right.
and then eventually started to discover that there were, um, I would say, like less. That had maybe less budget, but with taking me in all kinds of places where, like suddenly the TRX, I had like a 16-week program on TRX that was so
Nice.
fucking hard. Like it was really really tough, and I was like, wow, okay, so that guy was, a guy from Florida that, like did his best with the budget he had, but like it was just like fantastic. And
Yeah.
then discovered, like George St. Pierre did one that, like really is um, body, like mostly body weight, but some dumbbells and stuff. But then again, like after a few weeks, you're like, oh my God, like I'm my muscle aches and shit, like, but like those are schedule you print and you just fill the checkbox, like, and you're
Yeah,
like,
man.
wow, like, and then you're
Yeah.
done and you're like, my God, I went through that whole program and like there's a sense of pride. There's um, obvious visual, like,
Yeah.
uh, uh,
Results.
results.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the purpose of these programs. That's probably why I initially it was great, but I eventually kind of created some of my programs because
Cool.
um, that in the because they're pretty much like Beachbody. They're all TV promos and all, like, so they're intended in making you look better because they
Yeah.
want to have those before and after
Yeah, the
pictures,
testimonials, yeah.
which
Completely.
is not necessarily only what I want to achieve with that. Like I
Right.
want to be in better shape. I want, like that's why running outside is something I enjoy a lot. I moved from the South Shore to the North Shore where I do, and I have to look into that. But like I was close to some nice trails in mountain. I'm going to
Beautiful.
be looking at the same thing kind of on this side of the suburb. Um, and yeah, like it's this is my new rush, like it's those
Yeah.
endorphins big time.
Yeah, big time. That's cool. So it sounds very similar for you because it's so important. Anybody that's listening to the show that may be at the beginning stages, like it's
Absolutely.
super important to replace that negative energy and with something. And what better way to do it than couple it with exercise, right? And just getting moving. So that's cool that worked the same way for you. It sounds like.
You said you were 3 years in, and like before we started recording, I was asking you, like you decided to uh, again, like I have like three types of guests. Like the people that overcame stuff, which you did, and I have people that only does like the therapy or whatever, and I have had those guests as well. And you mentioned that you were kind of a mix of both.
Yeah.
Where do you fall into kind of giving back, and like how did you decide to articulate that into kind of helping the next of kin?
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to mention that. So I basically what I'm doing now is so I had done the 22 years at the time at my job at the grocery store, got up to assistant store manager, and I was kind of feeling a little bit unfulfilled with the job, to be honest. And I think there was a degree of what we talked about early in the interview with the COVID, just kind of rubbing me the wrong way. It wasn't. However, saying that, there's a lot of the part of the job that I did like. And, I turned 40 last summer and, I was getting to that stage where I was starting to mentor the new crop of managers that was coming up. And I very much enjoyed that. It's very rewarding. So, I ended up taking a 6-month leave of absence, a sabbatical, last summer. And just to kind of get my head right, I wasn't, like I say, I was getting this feeling of dread going to work, and I was like, I didn't feel like I was bringing 100% of myself, and to me, that's not acceptable. I'm not just going to go get a paycheck. I want to make sure that I'm bringing the best version of me that I can, and I wasn't. So I took a step aside. I had never really taken any time off work aside from a week off here, a week off there. Some paid vacation here and there. So, I took the 6 months off under the guise I was just going to, go see my mom a little bit more, and because she lives in BC, and do some traveling and, work on some stuff that I've always wanted to. And it's kind of getting to the stage when you're getting to that age of 40, you're going, you know what? I keep saying I'm going to do all this stuff and it's accumulating, and it's going to be like, okay, when am I actually going to do this? Am I going to wait till I retire to do some of these projects or these things that I'm, passionate about? And so it was a little bit of that too. So, I got to, work on an album with my band, and which was a lot trickier, right? Because everybody's recording remotely and sending their tracks, and I'm
Mhm.
mixing at home. And so there's all these different things, that you're kind of adapting to. And I want to say about a month and a half into my sabbatical, I was creating this course online. It was all about like the physical and mental health benefits of creativity. So I was getting people into, why you want to take up painting or take up re-engage that hobby. Like there's so many people that have a guitar that they bought 10 years ago, it's sitting collecting dust in their living room. Like re-engage that, especially right now. It's like such a great time to do so. So I was building a course around that. And I remember I got on a podcast with this one guy. His name is Mike Schwartz. And he had just got through this coaching program called Enlifted. And he's like, well, if you want some credentials behind what you're doing, and I kind of verbalized that to him. I'm like, who's going to listen to me? I'm just some guy, right? And he's like, well, get some coaching certifications. I'm like, yeah, it's not a bad idea actually. So he told me to look up this guy named Mark England. So Mark England is the head coach over at Enlifted. And it's all like, it's very language based coaching. It's all about like inner dialogue, how we're talking to ourselves, and then therefore how we're presenting ourselves and talking to other people. So the four pillars are, statements of negation. So like, I can't, I don't do this, binary or extreme, very dramatic language. So like, I always do this and this always happens to me, like, which is
Mm-hmm.
clearly never the case, right? It's never always or never, right? So it's backing off of that, using soft talk, especially to yourself. So when you're like, yeah, maybe I'll go do that, or I could, or I should do that. Using these types of phrasing with yourself affects you, right? When you're trying to set goals, especially when you're in like recovery, you don't want to be like, yeah, I maybe I should not drink tonight versus I'm not going to drink tonight. Very different and
Absolutely.
very different energy behind those, right?
Yep.
So, and even in management, so I started reflecting on my own management style and how it could get better. And I just ate this stuff up. And Mark is an amazing head coach, amazing instructor. He has a very good TED talk, actually. If anybody wants to look it up, just like a Mark England TED talk, and it kind of gives you his story. Basically, just quickly on him, he was a martial arts fighter that blew his knee out at age 23 and very much got into this victim mentality, and the world's out against him, and just very tense and very fearful, right? And not wanting to show that he's fearful. And he got into this language thing, and it got him. It flipped everything inside of him, the way he was talking to himself and the way he was approaching the world. And now he has a completely different view on everything. And so he's all about language and how we talk to ourselves. And I was noticing that in inner dialogue, pretty much everybody I talk to has that inner critic or that inner parent, the angry dad or mom or teacher or something that, like, when you make a mistake, you're like, you just crap all over yourself, right? It's always like, you idiot, like, why'd you do that? And blah, blah, blah. So getting out of that, first of all, being aware of that, but then consciously getting out of that, showing yourself the compassion that you show your friends, that you show your family, and then what that does to you. And then, coupling that with actual proper breathing. Mark was the first guy that pointed out to me that, as you grow older, and I'm not sure how it is for you, Alex, but for me, when I was at work, you always hear about fight, flight, or freeze. Like when you get into a mild, or let's face it, more than mild stress response at times at work. And I would do the freeze. So I'd have, like, my phone ringing, as assistant store manager, you'd have like, okay, somebody needs you down there. There's a customer complaint, whatever. I got to send an email. Somebody's talking to me about something. And I know I got a to-do list as well. And I would just hold my breath. And Mark says, that's not, you want to be in that parasympathetic state. That's where you're most creative. That's where your body language is showing that you're relaxed. So people want to be around you. Right. So he's the guy that's like, he always says low and slow. So when we're talking about the way that we're talking to ourselves, we're getting into story work. It's really about unpacking stories that have been haunting or trolling you for years, right? That have just been ruminating in your head, getting them out on a Google Doc or on a piece of paper, and then breathing them. So just like airing, it's all about airing it out, right? All these narratives, these stories that have just made you feel uncomfortable, writing them out, and then reading them out loud, literally airing them out with this nice breathing and reading techniques. And it's amazing. And then what you'll do is you pick out certain sentences that'll be really like negative or like statements of negation, and plucking out just one or two words and replacing them and turning it into an affirmation. And then before you know it, you're using your same words, your same language, but you've just changed it ever so slightly. But the charge is so different. And then you
Mm-hmm.
say that to yourself for 30 straight days with some breath in between, which just supercharges that affirmation. And it's crazy, dude. So like, like the story work therapy or the story work sessions, and just all the breathing techniques is just amazing. And it's been great for getting into, I then went and got a recovery coach certification. So that's what I've been working on, is this, like, for me, there's nothing better than I could think of to do then to come out the other side of this sobriety, it helps me stay accountable to myself as well. And the flip side is also helping people. I remember what it was like. That's not that far away from me, right? I'll always remember that those stories I just shared with you. And I feel comfortable enough now. Before my first, and this is the difference between my first sobriety, 4 or 5 years ago, when I've had that first 3 years, I was still ambiguous about it. I was still hiding to a degree. I would tell my closest friends, but kind of, hey, like, I'm not drinking right now. So, whereas, it was almost like setting myself up to be able to go back in and try it again.
Yeah,
Honestly, in hindsight. And that's what I was doing. I wasn't being super upfront about it. I was being, again, the soft talk, the ambiguity, right?
absolutely.
So I'm setting
It is.
myself, right? So I'm setting myself up for being solid about it now, and so that's my new deal. I got through level 2 certification for Enlifted this past January, and Mark was his presentation skills are just immaculate, and it just climaxed at such a way. He showed this video that was like a metaphor for kind of what he expects from us, and I just remember being overcome with emotion, and it cut back to him, and he's not a big crier. And he's tearing up, and he kind of does, bye bye, the power vested in me. You can go ahead and blah. And I'm watching everybody on the Zoom call, right? We're talking a lot about Zoom calls, and everybody in there is just so emotional and tearing up. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm quitting tomorrow. Like quitting my grocery store job. So I typed up my letter and had it in my back pocket. And I was like, no, hold on. Like, I got to make sure a couple things are in line before I do this. But that's what I did. And I was just like, I had that feeling. I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And the thing is, it's combining everything that I've been doing for those 22 years. It's not like I'm completely starting from scratch, because that whole time, like probably the last, I'll say 8 years, I'd been in a leadership role, even more than that, but specifically the last 6 years, I was assistant manager. So very much a point person for this kind of stuff. And so very familiar with all sorts of different people and ages and demographics and all that. And then that's my passion, dude. I want to help people that, I just remember what it's like. It's so empty and helpless feeling and dark and all that. And just to be able to help somebody get out of that. And even going back to that first AA meeting, that compassionate, empathetic feeling that you get that completely changes your life. Sign me up. So that was my motivation.
Absolutely.
And that's my story that's led me to the coaching I'm doing now. Thanks for the opportunity to mention that too, by the way.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, find me on, so I have a program set up right now. It's called recoveryroadmap.me. So recoveryroadmap.me, and it's the front, whatever that slash, recoveryroadmap.me/learn. So learn will have a little bit of a commercial, kind of give you an overview of what's going on with it. And available to get an ebook I just did, which is just my story, a lot, just fleshing out some of the stories that we talked about here tonight. Just sort of a confessional, a little bit of humor in there too. Like everybody, so you can kind of laugh at yourself a bit along the way. And so that's it. And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at MattGardiner780.
And for all of these links, Matt's going to be providing them so that, you can find them in the description of the podcast episode. So no worries about that. Last question I got for you, Matt, is what would you consider, like a few years in and with, all that training in taken, I like to leave my guests with, not my guests, but my listeners with some kind of afterthoughts of what is for you today an healthy, 3 phases, healthy diet of taking care of yourself. And I mean, mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah.
What is that, like that daily or weekly diet of, the things that you have and need to do to be in good shape?
That's a great final question. I love it. So yeah, definitely the exercise. And exercise, and you touched on it. I think you didn't quite say it, but I'm pretty sure, I imagine this is what you mean. Exercise is so good for you mentally as well. What it does for you mentally is just like, yeah, so that can't be, I almost do working out like more for the mental than the exercise, if you get what I mean. So exercise for sure. I took up yoga. So stretching, I just love. The older I get, the more I want to keep stretching. And yoga is like that moving meditation, right? So I'm trying my best to get into meditation. So, so I'd say stretching, I'd say exercise. That could be weight resistance. It could be jogging. That could be running, whatever that, just move. And music's the other big one that I couldn't, because that's when you're talking body, mind, spirit. That's my spirit, man. That's like what it gets into my soul is expressing myself in a way that's a little more abstract and a little more like, from my heart, heart to my hands, basically, right? So playing some guitar and singing, those are my three for sure.
Awesome. Matt, it was a pleasure having you
Well,
on. Really
thank you.
appreciated.
Pleasure's all mine.
It was great. Again, I encourage everyone to go take a look at that recoveryroadmap.me/learn.
Thanks.
And you're a great guest, man. It was
Thank
a
you so
pleasure
much,
having you on.
dude.
Really.
Pleasure's all mine. And yeah, I really love the what you got going on with the show. I've subscribed and been listening to some episodes. You do a great work. So keep it up, and pleasure's all mine.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.